Hello and welcome to the agenda. I am Ajay Kaul. Today we will discuss about plans of Biden administration to review America's peace deal with Taliban. Just days after assuming power, the Joe Biden administration has said it will review America's peace deal with Taliban, which was signed in February last year by the Donald Trump administration. The US particularly wants to check whether the Taliban has lived up to its commitments like cutting ties with terror groups and reducing violence. This is a very significant development which can have impact on India. In the agenda today, we will try to analyze what impact the move will have. We have with us former Deputy Chief of Indian Army Staff, retired Lieutenant General Gurmeet Singh, and retired diplomat Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar. But before we begin our conversation, let's have a look at this small report.
The US will review the peace agreement signed with the Taliban in February last year, the Biden administration has announced, just days after assuming power on January 20. The key elements of the agreement signed on February 29 in Doha included withdrawal of US troops along with bring down the number of NATO or coalition troops within 14 months from time of signing the deal. On its part, the Taliban agreed not to allow any of its members, other individuals or groups including Al-Qaeda to use the soil of Afghanistan to threaten the security of the United States and its allies. Other elements included ceasefire, removal of sanctions on Taliban leaders and release of prisoners held by both sides. The Afghan government, which was sidelined deal, was unhappy as it felt that Taliban could not be trusted, and its apprehension proved right as Taliban, instead of reducing violence, increased attacks on the government forces and officials. Ever since the deal was signed, the Taliban has been trying to capture power across Afghanistan and have succeeded in some areas. Soon after Joe Biden took over as the US president, his newly appointed National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan spoke with his Afghan counterpart Hamidullah Mohib and made clear the United States' intention to review the deal. The US specifically wants to check whether the Taliban is living up to its commitments like cutting ties with terror groups and reducing violence. India is watching these developments closely since these have a significant impact on our strategic interests. Here report.
Now let's welcome our guests, Lieutenant General Gurmeet Singh and Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar. Welcome to the program, both of you, sir. So I'll first go to Ambassador Sajanhar. You must have read about Biden administration's now latest that they will be reviewing the deal with Taliban. How do you see this development?
Well, from India's perspective, it's a welcome development, as you mentioned. And of course, there have been some indications available over the last several months, and particularly over the last week or so, that Biden administration will be having another look at this deal. We know that the deal was signed on the 29th of February last year, 2020. Right. And basically it was that Taliban would sever all its connections, sever all its ties with terrorist organizations like the Al-Qaeda, like the Islamic State. It will have a conversation, a dialogue with the Kabul government so that peace can be restored, so that there is a ceasefire that can come. And there is, going forward, there is peace and development. We have seen that on the 19th of January, when several of the nominees of President Joe Biden, they had their confirmation hearings in Senate. Tony Blinken at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. We also had the Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, with the Armed Services Committee, and also Avril Haines as the Director of the National Intelligence Agency. So all of them have really spoken about Afghanistan because they were questioned about Afghanistan by the senators. But in addition to that, the most important thing is the conversation that the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has had with the senior official from Afghanistan,
Right.
where they came, and this was the declaration, as you mentioned, Ajay, that whether Taliban is meeting its commitments, and so far it appears that it might not be fully meeting. Let me make two very quick points.
Yeah.
Number one is, as per the agreement signed by Donald Trump with the Taliban, all the US forces are to leave
By May.
Afghanistan by May of 2021.
Right.
And there is, of course, a sort of a consensus in the United States that over the last 19 years, it has lost more than 2,000 soldiers, and it has spent more than $1.5 trillion. So it should move, it's known as a never-ending war. So US forces should come back. But then Biden has said that he will see that by the end of his first term, that the US forces are back. So I think two things become clear. Number one, that this May 2021 deadline might be pushed forward. All the forces, there are about 2,500 of them.
Right.
At the moment, all of them might not come back. And secondly, that there is going to be a very close scrutiny as to what is happening there. In terms of ceasefire, although the attacks on the American soldiers have not increased, but the ceasefire, the violations and the violence in Afghanistan has increased significantly.
Right. We'll talk about that in detail. So I'll go to General Gurmeet Singh about strategically. As Ambassador Sajanhar mentioned about the deal, the main key elements were that Taliban will cut ties with Al-Qaeda, etc., and it will reduce or cut violence. I don't think both of them have been met. What do you say?
Absolutely. In fact, I think it is very interesting at this juncture that the communication between the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Afghanistan counterpart Mohib. I think it gives a very good indication of how US is looking at this perspective. And your question, if I come dot on to your query, see, firstly, there has been a surge in the violence. There's been a targeted assassination. There have been targeted attacks in the current environment. And very in fact, there are two things. One is the peace plan, and second is the withdrawal of the US troops from Afghanistan.
Right.
So this, at this critical juncture, when the administration has changed in the US, and they are looking at to carry out the review of the peace agreement which they had last year. And apart from that, they also want to refresh their commitment onto this issue of both consultation of the government, consultation to the NATO allies, and also to the regional partners. In fact, I would say that the US is also concerned on the aspect, and they would like to assess that will Taliban deliver on what they're saying? And apart from that, have they really cut off their ties with the terrorist group? And have they reduced the violence? I think these are the critical assessment which they'll have to do. And apart from that, I think the entire world is looking at how US will look at the entire perspective, because with the change of the government, how much change they will have as far as the Trump thought was there on the issue. But when we look at it, on the security matters, mostly they have been bipartisan. And so therefore, the entire world is in the process of a wait and watch and see, because at the moment the US is so focused on domestic challenges which is there, and also the corona pandemic. So I think it is important for the world, especially from the security perspective, to see that how do they stick on to their peace process and on the withdrawal of the US troops from this area.
But General, as Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar mentioned, that attacks on American troops have reduced substantially. But at the same time, Taliban has escalated attacks on government troops and government officials. I mean the Afghan government officials. So it's clearly a violation of the whole deal, no? Isn't it?
It is, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And also, if you analyze 65% of the Afghanistan, there are imprints of Taliban which is there. So, and they have also not really stuck to the very aspect that they agreed as far as the violence is concerned, and cutting the ties with other terrorist organizations is concerned. And in fact, I think it is also important to see that looking at the background, looking at the history, the way they've been functioning, there are many areas, I think, which is a challenge as far as the peace process is concerned. When you look at Pakistan, a very large amount of the Taliban leadership has been located in Pakistan. Right. They've been interfering into it. And when you look at it, there's 6,500 of Pakistani fighters which are still active in Afghanistan. When you look at these all challenges, you've got to look at this perspective of US policies as far as Afghanistan is concerned and the decision on the peace agreement. I think all these things have got to be taken into consideration at this moment.
So, Ambassador Sajanar, as General mentioned, that 65% of the, in 65% of Afghanistan there is a imprint of Taliban. But I would rather see it like Taliban used this deal to try to gain foothold or capture power in various regions and provinces. They made so many attacks. Although they were defeated, also Americans also helped Afghan forces. But they have been trying to gain power using this deal. What do you say?
No, you're very right, Ajay. Let's put it this way, that over the last 19 years that the US troops have been there, and we saw that there was a surge as far as the American troops are concerned in around 2011 when we had, more than 140,000 troops from the United States stationed in Afghanistan. But whatever the United States has done, whatever the ISAF forces, whatever the NATO forces have done, they have not really been able to get rid of Taliban. And Taliban has, as you said, been expanding its footprint in Afghanistan. And the other aspect, Ajay, that we need to keep in mind is that Mr. Trump was in a hurry.
Right. I wanted to point out that he had that political, he had made that poll promise, so he was in a hurry to get out.
Yeah, he
but
had
that
a
failed.
political compulsion.
Yeah.
You see, he could see that the elections are coming, and if he was able to get forces back from Afghanistan, like he was able to get about 2,000 forces out of Syria, so he could go to the people and say that he is one president who's been able to get his boys back rather than sending more boys outside. You would recall that in one of the achievements, as he mentioned, of his tenure, he has said that he is the only president who during his tenure has not started any war outside the country.
Right.
So he was in a great hurry because that was of course a political issue for him, and that is why he wanted to make that commitment to basically to the American people. So that is why it's felt that he was being very lenient on the Taliban. He was not really holding them down, that are you meeting your commitments, the principal one being of reduction in violence.
I would say that the Trump administration had started giving clean chits to Taliban. Good boy.
Yeah, exactly. And you see, and that is why even as far as the what the general was saying, even as far as Trump's relations and policy towards Pakistan is concerned, because you would remember his tweet of 1st January 2018 when he said, we've given $33 billion to Pakistan and they treat us as fools and stupid, and the terrorists we want, they are harboring them, all those sort of things. But very soon when America realized that to get across to the Taliban, they need to go through Pakistan. Then they started going.
So I'll come on Pakistan later, but I want to ask General Gurmeet Singh about Trump's hurry. So Trump's hurry to get his boys back, has that jeopardized Afghan situation or complicated, maybe given advantage to Taliban?
When you look at US policy as far as Afghanistan is concerned, I think it has been bipartisan. Only difference is if you critically look at the word America first and America is back, that difference which is there. But one thing is definite, that it is a bipartisan perspective as far as the Afghanistan policy is concerned. Trump had his different style. In fact, the way he was trying to say back by Christmas, and he was trying to hurry up the thing, and amount of, I think, excitement which was shown when the Doha agreement was signed in February 29. I think those were the things, but I think the aim is same for the US from that point of view. But at the same time,
But
they are doing the
General,
peace.
if I may interrupt you, as you said, the bipartisan view or policy on Afghanistan. I may mention here that the Trump administration had started giving clean chits to Taliban and said that they have cut ties with Al Qaeda and all those things. Al Qaeda has shifted base to Iran and all those kinds. I mean, I see it as giving clean chit to Taliban in their effort to justify the deal. What do you say?
Absolutely. See, one thing is definite that when you look at the situation in Afghanistan and the factor of Taliban is concerned, nothing much has changed on the ground. Their leadership was still staying in Pakistan one, and they are still, I would say that there has been a surge in violence, there has been a targeted assassination. So how do you how do you go ahead with the peace process when they are not sticking to the commitment? And I would say that US also would only withdraw once they have taken consideration of all their responsibilities as far as this issue is concerned. And it has got to be done in a very comprehensive way, and that's the way they want to do it. And I would say that when it has got to be seen for many other factors, factor of Russia, Iran, China, Pakistan, I think these are the important factors which have got to be seen. And also from the viewpoint of India. So I think it's a very comprehensive way that the whole aspect of the relook on the Afghanistan policy which will be done by the US administration. But at the same time, bipartisan I meant is that the aim still remains the same. That's why I would say that the involvement of the Afghanistan government, involvement of the NATO, involvement of the regional parts,
General, when the deal was signed, Afghan government was not happy. And ISAF partners were also not happy. They thought that they were kept in dark. So nobody was happy. Only Trump administration was happy, and Pakistan, of course.
Absolutely, I agree with you. In fact, there was a lot of opposition to it, but at the same time, one could see that from the US and particularly from the Trump and the methodology has been there as far as the diplomacy is concerned. But let's not forget one thing that the present president, he's got a huge experience as far as diplomacy is concerned. In fact, I would go to the extent of saying this peace process had actually started when he was the vice president. So he's got an absolutely heart, mind, and the hands in it. So I think that is what is more important factor as far as the US-Afghan policy is concerned.
Right. Mr. Sajna, we'll talk about Pakistan. So the role of Pakistan, I'll say brinkmanship of Pakistan in the whole thing, and where does India stand?
I think the more the departure of the US troops gets delayed, the better it is for India.
Right.
And we have been sort of, whether it is Almai Khalilzad or his predecessor, we have been telling the United States that, they need to stay there for as long to stabilize the situation in Afghanistan and then only withdraw. You would remember that in 2017, just after Trump had come, in September he had come out with the South Asia strategy. And on Afghanistan, there was a 3-point strategy that he had made, that there would be no artificial deadline for withdrawal from Afghanistan. You recall that, Barack Obama had said that 2014 is the deadline when all our troops are going to come back,
right,
and all our forces are going to come back. So what Trump said in September in the South Asia strategy, September 2017, no artificial deadline. They would ensure that peace is established in Afghanistan, irrespective of how long it takes. And number 3, he had mentioned that, they will put pressure on Pakistan, and also that, India should get more actively engaged and they will work more actively with India. But of course, all these things, and he even added some more troops, 4,800 troops he sent to Afghanistan. But all these things sort of, came to a naught, because within about a year or so, till the end of 2018, he was able to see that this policy was not working and that he had to go to Pakistan.
I think Khalilzad played a big role in it. He was apparently batting for Pakistan and Taliban. Maybe my assessment is wrong.
Well, yes, in a manner of speaking, because I think the Americans also realized, what was their objective? Basically, let's look at the objective. Number 1, to get their soldiers back, to get their boys back, because they've been there for 20 years. They have really not been able to establish. Number two, to ensure that whatever is happening in Afghanistan is not able to have any security adverse impact as far as the United States and its allies are concerned.
Right.
So, ensure their own security and get their boys back. And of course, anything else that, peace is established here. And the other point, that Tony Blinken has made and also Jake Sullivan has made, which is very critical and crucial from our perspective also, is that the gains of the last 19 years in terms of, empowerment of women, of the girl child, education, human rights, democracy, etc., that those gains are preserved and those gains are not lost.
Right.
So this is something also that all the nominees of Biden have been underlining and emphasizing. And Mr. Biden also, I think this is, of course, we really will need to see, because there can be, these are ideal positions and idealistic positions.
Right.
But how does politics play out? Whether, it becomes in terms of domestic politics, what the Democrats are demanding, what the Republicans are also demanding, that the other troops should come back. But of course, for the time being, I can say that this May 2021 deadline is not going to be observed.
General, I want to ask you about impact on India, and particularly has India has been putting in a lot of money, investment and capacity building, but is that enough, or do we need to do something more strategically which we are not doing?
Firstly, Ajay, you asked a beautiful question, what is the impact on India? In fact, the impact on India is that it affects the whole arc of terrorism, which is very important because with the Pakistan hand in it, and Pakistan is the one whose hand has been there in the destabilization of Afghanistan. From that point of view, it affects the terrorism arc and the intensity of terrorism which emanates from this area. Apart from that, this is also affects the Pakistan ISI. They're linked with the Taliban, they're linked with Al-Qaeda. In fact, a very large amount of Taliban leadership has been staying in Pakistan. They have anchored themselves in Pakistan, and Pakistan Army and ISI has been helping them out throughout in the perspective. Apart from this, this also affects the long-term interest of India. And the political stability or instability in Kabul has got definitely an effect on from our perspective. And also the power sharing agreement and the peace process, this has got direct bearing on this area and effect on India. But very importantly, you asked me, how should we look at it? I would say that we got to look at it from a broader diplomatic engagement point of view.
I'm saying what more could we do? I mean, in strategic terms. Particularly, I'll refer to America's repeated demand that we should have troops. India should send troops to Afghanistan, which we have been reluctant to do. I mean, those kinds. We have to close. So last comment, yeah.
Yes, I would say that we have focused on the development assistance. We have focused on training and investment. We have also supported and invested in the area of their National Directorate of Security. I think those are the areas that we need to help them. And apart from that, I think we are the largest donor. We have pledged $3 billion US as far as Afghanistan is concerned.
Yeah,
but as it relates to troops, I think we should not get directly involved with the troops in this area.
But maybe not directly, putting in troops, but maybe strategically, military strategy wise, shall we support them, help them more? Or
Ajay, can I make a comment here?
Yeah, please. After General, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
I totally agree with you. I think we got to look at it from strategic perspective and take hard decisions about it. But I personally feel that we need to keep going in the
particularly helping the Afghan Defense Forces in strategy-wise meeting the Taliban terrorist challenge. In those, yeah, brief comment. Can we do that, General?
Yes, we should keep doing it. I must tell you that we've been helping out Afghanistan since very long. I am from the National Defense Academy. Even in 1973, we had the Afghanistan cadets who have trained with us. And I think this is the way we should go ahead with the focus on training, investment, export, investment, development. I think these are the areas we should go and strategically also ensure that the stability, and we have categorically said the entire process should be Afghan-led, Afghan-owned, and Afghan-supported. I think that's the way we look at it.
So before we close, I think Ambassador wants to say something. One last
Very short comment, Ajay. One is, of course, no boots on the ground there, and support and train and equip the security forces, whether it is police or army, Afghanistan security forces, we should do that. Secondly is, when on 29th of February, the agreement was being signed in Doha, our ambassador in Qatar, he attended the signing ceremony.
Right, I know, yeah.
And my foreign secretary was in Kabul on that day.
Right.
So we need to maintain our ties with the Afghan government. Also, we need to
Other political
expand.
parties. Yeah.
No, political parties and also the regional players.
Clans,
whether Bari
all clans,
Pakistan, whether Iran or Uzbekistan or Russia, Central Asian countries, because that is where, they will get much greater responsibility.
Right.
To ensure that there is security and peace and tranquility in the country.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have to close. Our time is up. But thank you both of you for participating in this nice debate.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is all in the agenda today. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with another important topic tomorrow. Till then, goodbye.